Hello, my spooky friends. It's been a minute, but as those who have watched my live streams know, I just started a new job and life's been a bit hectic. But I thank you all so much for your continuous support during this time. And coming into the new year, you can expect to see those weekly uploads again. And tonight, I have a nice long one for you. It's a 3-part series I recorded all in one sitting, just for you guys. So I hope you enjoy. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I've been a police officer in my hometown of Camas, Utah for as long as I can remember. I never really had any desire to wear the badge. Hell, I never really had any desire to do anything but play baseball. I just had one issue in that regard. I sucked. My father was a police officer, and over time he worked his way up to chief, replacing his own pa in that position when the time came. Naturally, I followed suit, joining the family business right after I turned 18. Although I didn't yearn for the badge, I slowly grew into the role and found myself enjoying most days on the job. And just this last year, I, myself, replaced my pa as chief, being thrust into the position at a younger than average age, which was an extremely proud moment for myself and my family. The job is an easy one, I won't lie in that regard. Camas has a crime rate 53% lower than the national average. Everybody here knows each other, and any disputes can be pretty easily dealt with through a discussion with both parties. Honestly, this town probably doesn't need any police. Well, that was until 5 years ago, when they arrived. They were called the Children of Chaotic Freedom, a group that arrived in Camas to, as they claimed, live a life of religious freedom and to be closer to the earth. Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. Their arrival in the town was met with hostility and an overall air of anxiety. Our locals weren't accustomed to outsiders, especially not 44 of them that, were part of a cult. To ease tensions in our placid town, myself and my pops took a trip out to their commune to hold a meeting with the group's leader, Sidney Savage. The commune was a 5-minute drive northwest of the main town area. It was in a secluded area just off to the left of a dirt road. The large wooden gates towered above the minuscule array of flora which grew here. It stuck out like a sore thumb in an otherwise barren wasteland. My pops and I were met at the gate by 2 immensely large men. They wore white shirts, black slacks, and black ties that both donned an insignia of a red circle with arrows pointing outwards from all directions. Both men looked virtually identical. Shaved heads, pale, almost gray skin, dirty yellow teeth, and piercing emerald eyes. They did not speak when we introduced ourselves and refused our outstretched hands. They led us through the gates and into a large hut just right of the entrance. Inside the hut, a woman, also sporting a shaved head and green eyes, though wearing a bland, brown robe, filled both of us a cup of water before leaving without uttering a word. A few minutes passed before Mr. Savage entered the hut, kicking his heels together as he entered. Sidney Savage was the antithesis of his followers. While they were strange, bland, and robotic, he was charismatic, energetic, and friendly. His followers wore plain and frankly depressing clothing, while he donned a vibrant and immaculate slim-fitted ivory-colored suit. He wasn't a large man by any means, standing at around 5'5", but he had a deceptively strong handshake that he didn't seem to force. He had a strong head of slicked back black hair and deep brown eyes that often became challenging to discern from his pupils in the dimly lit hut. As we spoke, Sidney would flip a coin through his fingers for the entire 10-minute discussion. My father said nothing during this time, favoring me in a speaking role while he was transfixed on the coin like a cat focusing on a laser pointer. The conversation was rather rudimentary, and nothing of note came up. Sidney explained the group wanted to be away from the busy city life, but didn't want to intrude on the town, so chose to stay at a distance while still being close enough to mingle and partake in trade. Once the discussion reached its logical conclusion without any antagonism, and before we overstayed our welcome, we departed back to our cruiser and drove back to the warm familiarity of our town. "You alright, Pop? You ain't said a word in ages," I asked my newly mute father. Yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it, boy," he eventually responded. "I don't think we are going to have much trouble with them folk, Johnny. We gonna be alright." And he was correct, until he wasn't. 6 months passed from when the group first arrived in Camas. They mostly kept to themselves in that time, only venturing into town when they had items to buy or sell. They would often buy supplies and tools while they would sell things like furniture they had built and crops they had grown. They must have been well versed in agriculture, as their ability to grow crops in that area was astounding. Their trips into town would rarely last too long, and they would speak as little as possible with the townsfolk. Sidney was never spotted, and most likely chose to stay in the commune. They were a weird group, but they never caused any issues, until one night, when 3 members of the group arrived at Mike's metal bar. Witnesses say that they were much more social this time than any other time in the past, buying people drinks and conversing with others in the bar. However, these conversations mostly revolved around the commune and the cult and why people should join them out there to better themselves in this world. After the 3 members became overly assertive with some patrons of the bar, the 2 security guards attempted to remove them. However, the 2 male members quickly turned violent and smashed their glasses across the faces of the security guards. The female member was then said to have brandished a butterfly knife, which she drove into the chest of one of the guards before wiping off the blood across her face. The 3 members quickly fled while customers tended to the injured guards. It took some time for us to question the witnesses and gain a good understanding for what went down in the bar, but once it became apparent that the friendly cult was in fact as dangerous as every other cult, I rounded up the troops and drove out towards the commune. My father strangely refused to go and even questioned my desire to. He felt it wasn't clear-cut enough that the cult was involved, and it could simply have been 3 outsiders or fraudsters knowing they could point the blame. I, enraged, stormed out of the bar and took every other officer in town with me, warning them to be prepared to be met with hostility and most likely violence once we arrived. However, once we actually arrived at the location of the commune, we were met by bewilderment and shock. The commune and the people who frequented it were gone, with almost no trace left behind, bar some gates, some cultivated areas of soil with a few carrots growing, and the hut where we first met Sidney. Even the large gates had been taken down and most likely brought with them to wherever they fled. I decided to enter the hut alone in case it was an elaborate trap set up by these lunatics. Inside, however, was nothing but a letter sitting on the table. The letter had been written on a torn notebook page, the number 81112 scrawled across the top. Beneath it, a simple message left for my eyes exclusively. "See you soon, kid. Say hi to your old man for me. Winky face. Sid." Confused and downright pissed off, I folded the letter and placed it in my shirt pocket, then departed the hut and what was left of the commune. The station put out an APB on the group, but we never heard back on it. I never expected to. Groups like that live off the grid, and seeing firsthand the speed they possessed in packing up and leaving, I imagine they did this sort of thing quite often. A few years passed, and the town moved on from the group. They simply became an anecdote you would tell over a few drinks or to a family member visiting from out of town. Do you remember that crazy cult a few years back? Whatever happened to them? Their impact wasn't fully forgotten, however. In their place, a tree had grown right in the center of the commune's former locale. The strangest part about this was the speed in which it grew. It had grown over 30 feet in 5 years. I could not believe my eyes when after 2 years, it had grown larger than an adult tree. Martin Sanchez, the town's local gardener and expert arborist, though, was not as shocked. When the tree was first noticed, he was obviously called in for his expertise. He correctly identified the tree as a weeping willow, which has the ability to grow 3 to 8 feet in a year, so the growth was somewhat normal. What astonished Martin was the fact that the tree could grow at all in such an arid area. He took a special interest in the tree from that point on and decided to tend to it most mornings for the next few years, both to ensure it stayed healthy and to study the tree in an attempt to understand how it was growing here, of all places. This morning, I got a call from Martin. When I checked my alarm clock on my bedside locker, I seen it was 6:43 a.m. He was distraught and incoherent, shouting down the phone to come quickly. Tree, quickly. They need us. Before hanging up randomly. If he was calling me in that state this early, then it must have been something serious. I got in my cruiser and drove out to the location of the tree. I had originally theorized that it was most likely damaged by some hoodlums, and possibly even burned, which would have distressed Martin due to the care he had given to it. But when I turned off the road onto the dirt, I saw the tree, and it looked to be as fine as it always looked, though there seemed to be something foreign hanging between the drooping branches. As I drove closer, I saw Martin hunkered down in the dirt, weeping. I approached him, but he did not change his stance or acknowledge me. He just stared aimlessly into the dirt beneath him as tears flowed down his wrinkled face. I reached out my hand and placed it onto his shoulder. "Martin, what happened? What's wrong?" I inquired. He slowly raised his head to look at me. A look of abject terror was painted across his usually smiling face. He pointed up to the tree, but said nothing. He pointed and lowered his head once more. I looked up, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The foreign objects hanging from the trees were humans. They were hanging from the trees. I can't get that image out of my head. As I sit in the hospital waiting room, staring aimlessly at the boring, cream and brown stained tile ceiling, with every few tiles a frosted glass Persian housing a fluorescent light bulb, I wondered, why are hospitals so depressing looking? People come here feeling anxious and scared. Some come to die, yet they are not relaxing or comforting places. I never understood that, but at least the boring tiles kept my mind off the tree, if only for a split second. 7 people hanging from the weeping willow. Hanging might not even be the best word. They weren't strung up with rope. They were intertwined with the branches, like they grew out of the tree. We needed machetes to cut the bodies down, the tree resisting our attempts to take its fruit. It took some time, but we got 6 of them down and had 1 left. A young woman in her early 20s, short black hair and a pixie cut, and tanned but Caucasian skin. We got back up to the tree and sliced into the branch which consumed her. And then she woke up and screamed. That scream of abject terror has been ringing in my head all day. It rang through the arid wasteland and echoed off whatever wall of rock it hit in the distance. That scream and the woman it belonged to are the reason I'm sitting here staring at this boring roof, critiquing the interior design decisions of hospitals. It is also why the rookie cop who I brought along, Marissa Evergreen, is incessantly bouncing a ping pong ball against the wall adjacent to her. "Can you stop that, please?" I ask in a rhetoric manner. "Oh, sorry, Chief," she replies, catching the ball on its rebound and placing it in her left pocket. "Hey, Chief, how come you took me along anyways?" I took my eyes off the roof and looked at the 24-year-old, dark-skinned woman staring back at me with a smile that could light up even this boring, bland waiting room. She had only been on the force for a few months, and while somewhat naive and clumsy, she had been a great addition, and her friendly demeanor is appreciated by the locals and by other officers. "Well, Melissa, you need to get some experience dealing with situations like this, where the victim is traumatized and ordinary methods may not work," I explained to her. "Also, you're the only woman on the force." She laughed at that response while fixing her hair in a bun. "I guessed that all right," she lightheartedly replied. A moment of silence brushed over us again, but before my mind could wander back to the image of the hanging people and the screams of the lone survivor, Marissa decided to break the reticence with the only topic I wish she didn't bring up. "So, Chief, feel free to refuse answering this if it makes you uncomfortable, but what happened to your dad?" she shyly asked, hoping not to piss off her boss. "What did you hear happened?" I responded, genuinely curious, as some of the myths were really ridiculous. She hesitated a moment before saying, "I know everyone has a different story, each less believable than the next. That's why I asked, because some of the rumors aren't fair on you or your family. I just know that the general theme is he went a bit crazy, abandoned his duties, and you were forced to take over." I rubbed my eyes with my right hand, the thumb rubbing the right eye as my index finger rubbed the left. This conversation was always stressful and never welcomed. I gathered my composure and replied, "That is basically it, but a little more nuance involved. You see my paw." Before I could finish, Dr. Sarah Ramirez entered the fray and beckoned me over to talk. "Chief Carlson, can you come here for a moment?" she asked, but similarly to my question to Marissa earlier, it was delivered rhetorically. I got up from my seat and strode over to the doctor. Her expression was one of consummate professionalism, never allowing you to see how she really felt in those moments. "Is she awake, doctor?" I asked. "She is. She woke up screaming and in a panic. She kept shouting, 'Don't throw me down there.' Eventually we got her to calm, but not before an orderly got a nasty scratch across his cheek," she quickly replied. "She hasn't said much, but we were able to get a name from her. Laura Laney." I took a moment to process the name. I had never heard of a Laney family in Camas, or their surrounding towns. I did not recognize the girl earlier when I saw her on the tree. I did not recognize any of the bodies. Nevertheless, the best way to get answers was to question Miss Laney. "Is it okay if we go see her now?" I politely inquired. "Yes, but be gentle. She's noticeably traumatized," Dr. Ramirez replied before turning back down the white corridors and into the patient's room. "Duty calls." "Officer Evergreen, let's go," I ordered before marching down the hall towards the room which housed Laura. When we arrived in the room, we were met by the stare of a visibly shaken woman. She stared at us like a puppy stares at a family in a kennel, begging to be saved. I looked at Melissa and nodded towards Laura, hoping she would understand that I wanted her to break the ice, as she was the friendlier looking of us too. She did understand me, thankfully. "Hi, Laura. I'm Officer Evergreen, but you can call me Marissa, and this big brute beside me is Chief Carson. We were hoping we could ask you some questions if that's okay. Marissa perfectly asked, breaking the ice much better than I ever could. Yeah, sure. And you guys don't have to baby me. I'm 21, not 12. She smartly replied, while giving a half smirk. Of course, we meant no offense, Marissa responded before continuing on. What do you remember from what happened? I understand if it's hard to remember these details or to explain them, so please take your time. I remember everything vividly. That's why I keep waking up screaming in a panic. I keep feeling like I'm back in that fucking tree, like the branches are consuming me, Laura responded. I work part-time in a bar, the Painted Whistle. It pays well, and I keep all my tips, so it's a pretty good job. Bar the harassing truckers who stop by from time to time. I clocked out of work after my last shift, pretty late because I had to clean up after 2 customers who beat the living crap out of each other. She told us while pulling her hair, obviously stressed by the story. Anyway, I headed out to my car and I see the front left tire was slashed, like completely destroyed. For most people, this would have been the height of the problems of the day, but mine continued. It got much worse. I went to my trunk for a tire iron. Laura, are you sure you're okay? Would you like to stop? I asked, hoping she could continue, but not at the cost of her already fragile mental state. I'm fine. Just give me a moment, she said while rubbing her tears from her eyes and exhaling loudly in an attempt to stop any more tears from rearing their head. So I got to my trunk, and this fucking lunatic is in it and jumps out. I screamed and tried to hit him, but he got there first and hit me with the tire iron I went to retrieve. Talk about irony, she says, attempting a faint smile. Laura, what did the man look like? I asked. I don't know. He was tall and strong, but he wore a stupid fucking wooden mask on his face with 2 cut-out holes for eyes and a badly drawn frown carved into it. It makes my skin crawl thinking about it, she replied quickly. He hit me some more times on the ground. I can't tell you how many. I blacked out in the middle, and next thing I know, I'm coming to consciousness in the trunk of a car. It takes me some time to get my bearings, but eventually I'm somewhat okay again. The car is bumping a lot, so it's obvious we are off-road, maybe in desert. Eventually the car stops, and it's my turn to leap out of a trunk and attack. Except that didn't happen. This time the tears aren't held in, and they begin to flow down her rosy cheeks. Laura, would you like some water? Marissa asks her. Laura nods to her in reply while wiping tears away with the sleeve of her hospital gown. I thought I was going to be my own hero, but when the trunk opened, I leaped out and he wasn't there. Initially, anyway. He jumped out from the right side of the car and hit me again. Then he climbed atop me and punched me before he started. She stops to take the water from Marissa and takes a giant gulp in hopes to liquefy her constantly drying throat. He began to strangle me. The fucking bastard choked me so hard, I knew I was going to die. I tried to fight back, but it was no use. I did scratch his neck hard enough that he let out a shout. Enough to anger him, because after that, he punched me multiple times again until I blacked out. I woke up moments later on a dirty floor in a rotten shed. Blood poured from an open wound in my head, down into my mouth. I saw him pull some slats of wood off of a hole in the center of the shed. Once that happened, I forgot about everything. The danger I was in, the taste of metal from blood in my mouth. There was something about that hole. I can't explain it. It had a soothing, warm, and welcoming sound emanating from it. It relaxed me to the point I didn't even fight back when the lunatic dragged me towards it. And she put her hands over her face for a moment before retracting them. He threw me into it, and when he did that, I screamed. I screamed for fucking help. I screamed for my parents. I just screamed. I must have started saying things as I fell, or maybe it was my body's weird version of life flashing before my eyes as I fell. Massive amounts of colorful shapes and lights flashed around me. It was like I had fallen into one of those toys that you look into and see shapes, you know. A kaleidoscope. Marissa quickly responded. Laura again half smirked at Marissa, her lips crossing over themselves, but no teeth showing. Yeah, a kaleidoscope. It felt like I fell into one of them. Then what happened? I asked, completely perplexed by this supposed magical hole. Then I woke up screaming in that tree while you cut into it with a machete. Then, you know the rest, she said while crossing her arms and dropping her head. I looked at Marissa with a face of completely bewilderment, and she returned the expression to me. I paced around the room for a moment with my hands behind my head, attempting to make sense of everything. That story is fucking insane, I say. What, you don't believe me? I'm not going to make up a story like that. Fuck you. Laura angrily responds in defense of herself. I never said that. I shouldn't believe you, but I do, because people don't just grow out of fucking trees. This lunatic is doing it somehow, and we need to find out soon before more people turn up hanging from that weeping willow. I just don't know where to start. I responded before turning back around to approach Laura. Laura, thank you for your time. I know it's been stressful for you, but you can rest here now for as long as you need, and I assure you, Dr. Ramirez will take great care of you. And if you remember anything else, please call me directly on this number. I tell her while handing over my official Camas Police Department business card. Laura looks at the card, puzzled. She puts her hand over her mouth and again holds in tears while she continues to stare at the card. Chief Carlson, why does it say Camas, Utah? She asks me, fighting back tears. I look at Marissa, bewildered more now than at any stage over this past day. What do you mean, Laura? That's where we are, I respond. Laura immediately burst into tears and began muttering, No, 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 to herself over and over. Marissa put her hand out and touched her shoulder to calm her. She continued to cry, but stopped her repeated chants of no. Laura, what's wrong? Have we done something to upset you? Marissa said with her usual loving and friendly tone. Laura sat silent for a moment, not looking at us. She just stared at the bedsheets covering her legs, stained with wet patches from her dropping tears. Eventually, after she was sure her tears were finished, Laura raised her head to look at us, her face painted with an expression of equal parts terror and equal parts utter sincerity. I'm not from Camas, she said to us. I'm from Sedona, in Arizona. I sit in a dirty, banged-up old taxi, where there is barely any leather on the seats, and what little amount left is worn down to its last days. My shoes are slowly sticking to the carpet floor, and the smell is a mixture of pungent mold, alcohol, and gas station aftershave. Honestly, I thought I could deal with this horrible form of transportation if it wasn't for the heat. Arizona was going to be hot, but I was still woefully unprepared. I have only been out of state 3 times, and every time I leave, I'm completely unprepared and consistently in a state of confusion. However, every time I have left the state in the past, it has been a special and exciting occasion that I looked forward to, one I could look back on fondly. This occasion will be special, but I'm not looking forward to it. I will not look back at this with any feeling but disdain, but I will be happy to put it behind me. This investigation began in Camas, Utah, and I am determined to end it 553 miles south in Sedona, Arizona. I have made the trip for one reason and one reason only: to sit across the interrogation table from the wooden-faced man, or how his birth certificate reads, Marvin Dristan. Processing all the information that Laura Laney put forward to us during our questioning of her took me some time, and more than a few bourbons, but eventually I was able to accept her words as the truth. Partially because we had no other leads, and partially because we were desperately out of our depth. However, there were parts of the story we could easily prove. There is a bar called the Painted Whistle in Sedona, and after a call to the Sedona Police Department, we were able to confirm that Laura Laney both works there and was reported missing. Our break in finding Marvin came after one part of Laura's story kept standing out to me. I did scratch his neck hard enough that he let out a shout. A scratch that large would have to break the skin and possibly even draw blood. So we immediately checked under Laura's fingernails, and bingo, we found skin particles and dried blood. DNA testing was undergone by Salt Lake City PD, and a profile was sent back to us within a day. As expected, it didn't match with anyone in Utah. So we sent the profile to Sedona, and a match was found for a Marvin Dristan. Marvin was born 4/30/1982 in Mesa, Arizona. He currently resides in a trailer park just outside of Sedona. His appearance was described as 6'5", large build, Caucasian with a shaved head and no facial hair, blue eyes, no tattoos or piercings. He has one large scar, that of a circle with arrows pointing outwards on his left pectoral muscle, most likely from a branding. He has 5 previous convictions for petty arson and vandalism, the kidnapping and murder of 7 people, 6 successful ones. Sure is an escalation from lighting some fires. There are numerous missing persons cases in Arizona, and thankfully, with the help of our small police department in Camas, they have been able to close 7 of them. It was astonishing to see the massive differences and lack of similarities between his victims. Some rich, some poor, some old, some young. Some have squeaky clean records, while others, like G. Linhan, have multiple convictions. His were for public masturbation and indecent exposure. Male, female, black, Asian, Caucasian, people in their mid-50s, others in their early 20s. Marvin's attack seemed to be as random and as chaotic as they could be. He may have never been caught. A suspect profile would have been hard to create with the vast differences in his victims. Thankfully, like all serial killers, he got cocky. He slipped up. And thanks to the brave actions of Laura Laney, we nailed the bastard. The officers of Sedona raided Marvin's home yesterday, where they apprehended him and found massive amounts of incriminating evidence, including weapons, rope, tape, trophies of his victims, and last but not least, a wooden mask. I'm told that when he was arrested, he didn't speak a word, and he has continued to not speak. Hopefully I can change that when I get there. We have enough to put this guy away for the rest of our lives. But I need answers. I need to know how the bodies from Arizona showed up growing from a tree in Utah, and how the children of chaotic freedom are tied into all of it. When I entered the police station, I immediately saw what an actual station with an actual budget looks like. The Sedona Police Department blew our little office building out of the water with a sheen and pristine that just reeked of professionalism and respectability. Once I got into the building, I was met by Detective Gerald Grabowski, who brought me up to speed on any new developments, of which there were basically none. Upon entering the interrogation room, I finally got to look that psycho in the eye. That took some time, as when I entered, he had his head down, staring at the sparkling clean, white tiles beneath him. He was a large man, absolutely, but he was not intimidating or threatening. When I sat down and finally locked eyes with those steely, blue eyes, all I saw was a coward, the type of coward that lay in wait in the dark of night and attacks defenseless people from behind. The type of coward who would murder a single mother of two and toss her body down a hole like they were nothing but trash. Hello, Marvin. I'm Chief Johnny Carson of the Camas Police Department in Utah. Seems you've been busy, and the fruits of your labor are growing from a tree in my town, I say without taking my eyes off him for a moment. Now, I don't care too much for why you killed those people, or even how you killed those people, because the fact of the matter is, you're going to be convicted of these murders, and you will be given the death penalty. No, what matters to me is how the fuck does a monster like you slaughter 6 people and fail to kill 1 more, toss them down a hole, and they turn up in a tree outside my town over 500 miles away. He sits, but does not say a word. Time goes by, and the only noise to witness is some light breathing. Well? I ask again. What do you have to hide? You're caught. You're going down for this. Jesus Christ. Your only chance to actually beat the death penalty is to give us some answers. This falls on deaf ears once more, and I become frustrated due to a mixture of my lack of real interrogation experience and the stress in which this investigation has put me under. Answer me! I scream while pounding my fist into the metallic table, creating a deafening twang sound which echoes through the room. But even my sudden eruption fails to move him. Detective Grabowski puts his hand on my shoulder in an attempt to calm me. I took a few moments to gain my composure and considered leaving the room. But before I did, I asked one more question. The one that finally brought his eyes to meet mine. Look, just tell me this, Marvin, if nothing else. What do the children of chaotic freedom have to do with this? I asked, but he ignored me once more. Is Sidney Savage involved in any way? After that name left my tongue, Marvin immediately raised his head to look me in the eyes and smile. A wide smile, one that bared all his teeth to me. So, you do know Sidney Savage. I figured so. Now tell me how he ties into all of this. Martin continued to smile, but leaned forward across the table and stuck his tongue out at me. Initially, I thought this to be a sign of disrespect, but it was much worse. He flung his head backwards and then immediately forwards with immense force, smashing his chin into the table, decapitating his tongue completely between his teeth. Blood began to pour from his mouth profusely as he spat some at my face. He began to laugh maniacally as Detective Grabowski and 2 other officers dragged him from the interrogation room off to a cell down the corridor. I could hear his laughter the whole time as I cleaned blood off my face. A moment later, Grabowski returned, his pale, bald head now a shade of red from sheer anger. "You okay, man?" he asked me. "Yeah, I'll be fine, but it seems this trip was a fucking waste of time," I responded in a tone as angry as his complexion. "It didn't go to plan, that's for sure. But hey, look, let me take you out for a beer and we can try to forget the bullshit we just experienced," he suggested to me. I considered just getting the next flight back to Salt Lake City, staying in a cheap hotel, and traveling back to Camas tomorrow. But I had traveled here, and Detective Grabowski had been amazingly helpful to the investigation, so I decided why not. "Sure, Grabowski, you lead the way." We went to a sports bar just down the corner from the police station called Hamel's Sporting Star. The Cardinals were playing the Steelers, and Grabowski didn't want to miss any more of the game than he already had. He grabbed us 2 ice-cold bottles of beer, the perfect counter to the blistering heat. We sat at the bar as it had the best view of the 100-inch TV. "So, Grabowski, how'd you end up working as a cop in Arizona? The Boston accent, that strong, I find it hard to believe you were always here," I asked cheekily. "Haha, you got me. Boston born and bred. I ended up down here due to a woman." His sentence stopped abruptly as a wall of ice-cold air blew through the bar and shot up my spine. The room seemed to turn completely to ice, with a hue of pale blue consuming the light in the room as everyone present in it was frozen in place. Time seemed to have stopped for everyone but me. As the door to the bar flung open, and a silhouette walked through the blindingly crisp sunlight, eventually revealing himself to be a man, and one I knew well, Sidney Savage. He approached me, dressed in the same impeccable ivory suit he wore when we first met, the only change to his attire being the addition of golden circular-shaped sunglasses with a large rim around the lenses. The moment I saw him, I became overwhelmed by anger, a powerful anger for what this bastard has done to me, to my town, to my pops, and to everyone in that tree. I instinctively reached for my .357 and shot all 6 shots towards him, but instead of hitting the fucker, they passed right through him and hit the door behind him, as he seemed to modify his density on the fly. Panic instantly set in as I became increasingly aware of my impending doom. My fight or flight kicked in, and I flicked out the revolver magazine in an attempt to reload, until an icy cool hand gently brushed my gun downwards. "I think we can both ascertain that don't work, John," Sidney said to me as I looked up at him, the reflection of my helpless face looking back at me through his pitch-black lenses. "Now please, sit." He gestured to me whilst removing his glasses and placing them in his suit breast pocket. We both sat on a stool at the bar, the remaining patrons still fixed to their positions. I sat, staring forward, trembling from my anger, and unable to turn my head, unable to look at the man whom I hated so much in the eyes. "I can smell your anger from here, John," he said, his voice carrying a low drawl, while sipping from a whiskey he took from the hands of a customer. "I would be prepared to dodge your incoming attack, but I would hope you have gotten over any misconceptions about being able to hurt me. But don't worry, I won't hurt you. I'm just here to talk. Why do you hate me so much? Is it because of those damn security guards? They lived, didn't they? And I dealt with them troublemakers accordingly," he said, feigning ignorance to all the evil acts he has a direct hand in. I swallowed my pride and turned to look at him, prepared for whatever he threw at me. "Fuck you! You know exactly why I hate you. You brought violence to my town. You hurt 2 good men," I said while grimacing towards him. "You hung 7 people from a fucking tree like some sort of twisted art piece, and you fucking ruined my father's life." He took another swig from the whiskey glass before heading behind the bar to grab a skull-shaped bottle, one with an oddly motionless black liquid in it. He poured some into his glass and left the rest of the bottle beside him on the bar. As he began to walk back to his seat, he spoke. "That's some bullshit and you know it." For the first time, it seemed like there was almost emotion behind these words. "You know, that is what I hate about you humans the most. You spineless cowards are always afraid to take ownership of your own actions, with some pride. Oh, she made me do it. Oh, he said to do it. God told me to do it. It was the devil, not me. The voices said so. Don't give me that crap, John. You're better than that. The fact of the matter is, those 3 members of my group did what they did because they wanted to, because deep down, their primal instincts begged to be fed with blood. Myron Stan always had the darkness in him. He just needed a little suggestion, a little push in the right direction to achieve his true potential. Even your dear Pops had it this deep in him. I know you want to think I controlled your father's mind and made him partake in the actions that led to his downfall. You want to believe that because it gives you closure, and it doesn't sully the memory and image of your father, but the truth is, John, I did nothing more than free those thoughts in your father's mind. I only made suggestions and showed him his true self. He was the one who partook in those actions. I couldn't make him do it." No, that's a lie. You have always been a lying bastard, and you still lie, even now. I screamed back at him, shaking from anger from the bullshit he fed me. I am many things, John, but 2 things I am not are a mind controller or a liar. He quickly responded to me as he drank from the mysterious black elixir. All living entities are bound to rules, John. That is the way of the universe. We cannot change no matter how much we try. I am, myself, immeasurably powerful, but even I must abide to the universe's rules for me. There is no point in swimming against the cosmic current. It will not work. I will tell you my 2 rules, mostly because knowing this information will not make you any more dangerous to me, and partly because you have somewhat impressed me in your crusade to answer the questions this investigation has brought up," he proclaimed while he placed his hand on my shoulder. "I cannot kill a human, and I cannot control minds of humans. These are the rules I must follow to enjoy my existence. They were created in a hope to nullify my power, but honestly, it has just made my existence far more enjoyable. It has given me a true love and obsession with chaos. Laws exist, this is true, but what is just as true is that laws are malleable and can be molded to fit your purpose. Loopholes are the enemy of the laws, and they are always up-team steps ahead. So if I cannot kill a human, nor can I control the mind of one human to kill another, what I can do is give someone their greatest desire. I use this as the bargaining chip to have them do as I please, such as, I don't know, pushing an old lady in front of a bus, or throwing a live grenade into a crowd. Now, as we both know, those are pretty boring acts, but I'm just spitballing here. Humans are sheep. This is something you know as well as I do. They like to be led by more charismatic and confident beings, which of course has led me to having many followers across the globe, such as the cult that invaded your town, Mr. Dresden, and even your Pops. I quickly swung a left hook towards him, but like my bullets, I fell through him and landed flat on my face. While still discombobulated on the dirty floor, I felt Sidney grab the back of my collar and effortlessly toss me across the room. Before I hit the wall behind me, I was stopped in mid-air by Sidney with an outstretched hand. Just as I got my wits about me, Sidney closed his left hand into a fist. I was hurled forward, projected as if I were in a high-speed vehicle that suddenly stopped. I traveled right into Sidney's right hand, and he began to choke me. You can't kill me," I muttered out while I struggled to breathe. A as this tiny man crushed my windpipe with one hand like it was paper. Correct, but I can't hurt you. I can hurt you in so many different ways that you will wish you were dead, he replied with a smug grin before slamming me back down into my seat. Now sit. I began to cough uncontrollably as my ability to breathe was handed back to me. I took a quick swig from my beer in an attempt to hydrate my sandpaper-feeling throat before asking Sidney the question I needed answered most. So, assuming everything you just said is true, what about the tree? He smirked at me before taking another drink and stroking his beardless chin. He took his time, either to consider his words or to fuck with me. Probably both. Well, as you know, I enjoy loopholes, and my growth tree in your backyard was my little science experiment to gain the greatest loophole I can think of. I cannot kill humans, or mind control humans, but what if I can create something almost human myself? The rules would surely not apply to them, as they are not human. So in theory, I could control them. He explained to me as simply as if he were explaining the frozen game on the screen in front of us. What the fuck are you talking about? I angrily responded to him. I'm talking about clones, copies, hybrids. I'm talking about creating my own followers who will always follow my orders and never take things into their own hands. I'm talking about nullifying risk, John. That was the theory anyways. That tree was the womb of my machine, and it would grow my minions as fruit. The basic idea was to sacrifice a human in the mouth of the machine. It would then consume them completely right down to the last atom. Once the digestion had happened, it would birth a copy of the original human, except it wouldn't be human. It would be mine. He proclaimed to me while closing his fist and staring into my eyes with a look of pure determination. The good thing about a tree is there's no need for a live mother, just some good soil and time. You're actually fucking insane, I forced out at a loss for words, every word stemming harder than the last. No, John, you humans are insane. You never shut up about freedom, yet are no more free than a lion in a cage. But even a lion in a cage can rebel and attack the zookeeper. So I took out any possibility for that and decided to create my own followers. However, like all great ideas, there were some issues, a few kinks to iron out. Like the mouth opening up 500 miles away from the tree, and the fact that the clones grew out of the tree and they were already fucking dead, he said while laughing with his hands over his face, leaning into the table with a whimsical exasperation, almost in disbelief that it didn't work. Now, thankfully, I had Mr. Dresden down in Arizona to help me, a true agent of chaos. It seems like fate opened the mouth near him to fulfill his potential, but he was no use to me as long as the clones are stillborn. He stood silently, staring forward for a moment before clapping his hands, loudly and rigorously rubbing them together. Never mind. I think messing with human minds and creating chaos from a distance may be more fun anyway. All great inventors have failed inventions, and the growth tree is my first. Maybe I'll come back to it another time, but for now, I think I'm going to keep twisting all your weak minds until you snap, he replied while patting me on the back. I finished off my beer and attempted to process everything this lunatic had just said to me, deciding to focus on one point he made. Yeah, except it wasn't really a failure, I exclaimed. What are you talking about? Sidney responded, taken aback. Laura Laney? I smiled. She survived. She's in the hospital in Utah, I continued to explain, feeling a sense of pride in the shocked face he was now brandishing. Are you serious? You must be joking. You don't lie, and neither do I. Scout's honor. I was speaking to her only a few days ago, I said to him as he began to laugh. Well, that is surprising, and might I add, not the best news for you. I can't control her, or else I'd have known she was alive, which means Oh fuck, it does mean that, he said while rolling his eyes upwards to look at the roof. It means what? I quickly responded. It means something else's control. And it means if I were you, I'd get the next flight home and put a bullet between her eyes, he suggested to me with a facial expression of complete seriousness. I could sense his seriousness. I could feel that whatever he was speaking about was as dangerous as he seemed to think, and I felt sick to my stomach thinking about what it could be if Sidney was suggesting the extreme actions. There was a moment of complete silence before Sidney clapped his hands together once again. Well, best of luck with that. I'm out of here, he exclaimed while placing his sunglasses back over his eyes, and turning around to walk towards the door, Sidney began to chuckle quietly. What? Where are you going? I asked. Not sure, really. I haven't been to the Philippines in a while. I might go there and check out an old friend who owes me a favor. What about Laura? I confusingly asked, somewhat surprised at his response. Shoot her in the head. I literally just told you that, he responded before flicking something towards me and walking out the door, taking a small leap and kicking his heels together as the door swung shut behind him. I caught what it was he threw towards me and looked at it. The same coin that he flicked through his fingers when we first met. He had a penchant for the dramatic. The noise of the bar began flooding back as I stared down at the coin, the patrons unaware of what had just transpired in the same room as them while they stood frozen, everyone going right back to what they were doing the moment Sidney entered. Bar one customer, who seemed completely perplexed that his whiskey was now gone from his hand, the bartender quickly placing the skull-shaped bottle back on the top shelf. Grabowski continued on answering the question I had asked him, but I was not listening to him. I was too focused on what Sidney had just told me. Was he telling the truth? Or was this just another one of his sick games in the name of chaos? I had my gut feeling, but I couldn't tell, and therefore I couldn't wait around to find out. I cut Grabowski off mid-sentence and told him I needed to go due to an emergency. I took the next taxi to the airport and the next flight back to Utah. I arrived back in Utah before the day's end and drove right to the hospital. That is where I sit now, my revolver in my hand loaded with 2 .357 slugs. One for her, one for me. I know this is insanity to trust a man or a thing like Sidney, but I have no choice. Worst case scenario, if he is lying, is that an innocent woman loses her life and I'm labeled a lunatic just like my father. Worst case scenario, if he is telling the truth, is many more people could be hurt, or even worse. Any way you paint it, I've got to do this, and I'm going to do it. It is right now. But the hospital is still busy as always. Sickness doesn't sleep. I walk through the blistering rain which hops off the tarmac of the parking lot, and in through the sliding door. I tipped my hat towards the lady at the reception and took a quick left through the waiting room and down the hallway towards Laura's room. As I walked down the hallway, I was trembling. My hand was sweating profusely on the grip of my gun. I stopped to steady myself for a moment, taking 3 deep breaths, in and out. Once I regained my composure, I pulled up my revolver and turned quickly into the room, pointing it towards the hospital bed. But it was empty. She was gone.